So how's the energy between here and lunch? I think if we could start to try to build a little energy, let's take a selfie together. Everybody say cheese. Okay, there you go. I didn't do it right. Cheese. Okay, good. Actually, digital transformation is a really broad topic, and so I've got a lot of ground to cover in a short amount of time, so we'll take a fairly high-level view of it. But let me say that there's three key things I want to express. The first is the imperative and the context for which digital transformation of the communications industry is required. The second is the key role that the technologies that are the focus of this conference are that in play in that transformation. And thirdly, how we have to change our operating model and how the relationship between customer and vendor needs to change to really make this successful, in my view. And we'll give some perspectives and some examples of those changes. So let's start with context. We all have grown up in, or in my case, grown old in, the third industrial revolution. That's where the information age, of course. The fourth is where we are now. This is the place where digital systems integrate with physical systems and biological systems and are all supported by the underpinning of what needs to be an autonomous and secure hyper-connected infrastructure that the communications industry provides. So this, for me, as an engineer, is the most exciting time to be alive, maybe ever, because there's really, really cool stuff going on that can be mashed up to create new services. If we click, the technology waves that are enabling this industrial revolution started with the internet, of course, and now if you think back to the changes that happened between 3G and mobile to 4G and mobile and the new types of services that you get from the devices. And now imagine that in addition to connectivity or to capacity and coverage, we're also changing in the fifth generation of mobility, we're changing the latency, a drastic reduction in latency, and the massive connectivity. Those three enhancements to mobility will enable new immersive technologies that can immerse humans into digital worlds that will be limited only by our creative artistic ability as humans. Combine that with advances that appear up close to be linear in artificial intelligence and robotics, but when you look back, that linear is exponential. You know, there's a lot of talk about singularity and jobs being replaced, but I'm far more optimistic about the impact that these technologies will have on our world. We will be collaborating with, and already are in many cases, and even augmented by these technologies that are defining the next revolution. But that's the context. Now, why think about digital transformation for your business? In last year, actually it was this year, Fujitsu did a survey of 1,200 C-suite executives. 52% of them said that their business will not exist in the form that it is today in 5 years. That's startling. Think of some use cases or some examples of that, what Airbnb has done, what Uber has done, what Alibaba has done. And I'm going to further illustrate by picking on one particular industry, the media industry. You know, for 20 years, print has been losing to digital delivery mechanisms. And now television, linear television is losing, of course, to digital delivery mechanisms, a la Netflix, for example. But it's not just the subscribers they're losing, it's the advertising revenue. And the advertising in a digital realm, a digital delivery, is far more precise and effective than it is in a linear television mode. So this is why, in my view, I think we see major communications providers like AT&T in the US buying a content company. Do they want to be a television company? I don't think so. I think their strategy is actually to take a large market share of the advertising industry because they can use the information that comes from their communications infrastructure to uniquely differentiate their advertising, to target it to you, the consumer, in ways that give them location, the device that you're using to consume their media, the size of the screen that you're consuming it on, and even the method in which you got that distribution, whether it was satellite or landline or wireless. That's all targeting information to you that makes their advertising more effective than other methodologies. This will continue with augmented reality and virtual reality. This is only going to continue. But if we get a little closer to our own industry, when I go out and talk to many of our service provider customers, they pretty much all draw this picture for me. It's a kind of an old picture, but we all need to drive more value out of their investments while driving the cost of their infrastructure down, because the trend's the other direction. And if we try to understand a little deeper as to why that is, of course, they are now competing with cloud companies. Cloud companies that inherently have digital business models, which means that they can focus their investment on the software that provide the services that gets your consumer interest and share of your wallet. The service providers, on the other hand, the carriers, they have to deal with the investment in the network infrastructure and the legacy software systems that support that infrastructure. Of course, they want to be able to do as much as they can to invert that triangle so that they can invest more in the new types of software that we are all talking about here in this conference. But if you try to understand what the impact to the business model is and why this is important to transform, look at the numbers in terms of the revenue growth versus the CapEx to revenue ratios for those two different segments of customers. It's nearly inverted. But the real story also is underneath that, what they're getting for that investment is less. The new service velocity is very different, and the time to market to bring those services to you is very different. So clearly, there's an imperative for the communications industry to undergo digital transformation. SDN, NFV, and service orchestration are the key enabling technologies that will help them with that transformation. Then we start to look at what does the future network look like? What does it do? Today's network, of course, connects through pipes of people and devices to a particular industry vertical. And the service is that pipe, it's that connection. Tomorrow's network, in our view, has to be completely automated and provide an autonomous connectivity fabric of data exchange between industries, across industries, and across the applications that are defined by those digital systems, those physical systems, and those biological systems. And the service of the future network is not the connectivity of a pipe. It's the trusted, secure exchange of data relevant to the consumer. And so, what does the network look like inside? If we start to think about these three key layers that is in Fujitsu's vision for the next future network, and the big shift is from hardware-centric networks to software-centric networks. And what that means is that the direction of requirements that we use to optimize the layers and the technology in our networks has to change. If the biggest investment, of course, is in the hardware, then traditionally we have been architecting software to support the hardware in the physical network. Tomorrow, where we need to head is architecting the hardware to support the requirements of the software in the network. You end up with different decision-making in your architectures. So, Fujitsu's portfolio of Onefinity is that physical layer. It embraces disaggregation and programmability of that hardware. Programmability, obviously, that's the requirement of the software layer. It's as a result, very flexible and scalable. The virtual services layer is the layer where we digitize the services that the carriers provide. This is where end-to-end service orchestration provides a software abstraction to the digital platforms above it and abstracts the domains of NFV and SDN, which are controlling, of course, the physical and virtual resources of the compute and storage and network. And then service assurance is critical. Real-time policy is enabled. These are all enabled by analytics and intelligence that we continue to add to this layer of the network. This is the portfolio of Fujitsu's Virtura, portfolio of software. On top of that is this digital platform. This is where value is created by the carriers, ultimate and business value. And Fujitsu has released a technology recently. This is actually from the labs. It's not actually productized yet, but we're heading that direction, called a data exchange. And what it does is it creates an intelligent exchange of data that is trusted and secure within data communities that you establish. It's networking of data. It's not exactly if your mind is running to content-based routing and that kind of thing. That's not what it is. This is communities of data exchange that are trusted and secure. Underlying this is technologies like blockchain, IPFS for the addressing, and of course a management system to allow you to control. That kind of data exchange networking underpins the support for IoT and for cloud offerings that the carriers ultimately will want to generate revenue from. And so we've established the left-hand side of this chart, your left-hand side, the networking capabilities that are offered, and we can start to integrate artificial intelligence concepts to create even more value. Let me give you an example. As we think about the cycle of connecting, collecting, analyzing, creating value, and then back to controlling the resources in the network and the applications in the network, adding intelligence to this cycle gives us the ability to understand how we can create more business insight for the customer, for the carriers, because they will not only know, with this trusted data networking, not only know what the customer is doing with their network, they'll understand why. And then you can start to tailor the value propositions to different segments of customers with that kind of business insight. Very importantly, at the services layer, at the virtual services layer, this kind of continuous optimization gives us the ability to ensure that we have quality of experience via doing things like locating intelligently, even relocating where the service instances are, by scaling them, by assigning different levels of resources to particular services to make sure that that experience is the best it can be for their end user. And then very importantly, as we think about the importance of making the physical layer programmable, then the real benefit of that is automation. And with automation, you get the velocity of innovation at the speed of software versus hardware. And you get the ability to reduce the operating cost, obviously, and reduce errors. Big important issues in broad networks. So lots of promise for adding this kind of cycle of intelligence. You know, one last comment about what the network needs to be. We're also, as we shift towards software, we're changing the way that we approach building the solutions for networking. And obviously, open source has taken a really predominant role in the future solutions. The industry wants open source. We need to embrace open source. We still, as an industry, need to figure out what the right role is of standardization versus de facto standards. And it's not a panacea. While it is critical, we have to harden these and add value around them and recognize that they disrupt business models. They disrupt business models, but they also create new business models. And that's the place that we need to play as a community. And so what does Fujitsu's network business believe in? Our mission is to create the connected services for that digital world. The approach we're taking is to wholeheartedly embrace open network solutions and then power those with disruptive technology ecosystems. Fujitsu's ecosystem, yes, but also the customer's ecosystems. They're all unique. If I were to give advice to the service provider community, it was that this is a really big transition in the industry, digital transformation of the communications industry. We have to make sure we change our mindsets from selecting through a rigorous process the lowest cost vendor for a given component to finding those partners that can align with us on the big things that matter, like the transformation of business models, like the commitment, the real commitment to these kinds of open initiatives in the industry and the things that are defining that transformation. A little bit of an advertisement, but Fujitsu has been doing this open innovation for 15 years, is on 4 board seats for major open source initiatives, and in 2016 alone contributed over 4,000 commits to open source. My advice to the supply chain is that we have to change our mindsets from pushing technology down carriers' throats. As a mindset, I don't know how successful we are at pushing it hard, but to one where we're co-creating with customers. And this is a use case of co-creation with a customer, a Canadian customer that had a problem, which was, how do I really low cost and very, very quickly reach small to medium businesses that are off net? And so we worked with them, we iterated on concepts, brought to them a quick proof of concept based entirely on open source solutions, got their feedback, and then took that to production because the open source, of course, wasn't going to meet the final demands and scalability and so forth. And now we have a solution via co-creation with a customer that addresses the very hard to reach small to medium business market for innovative new virtual access networks. Another example for the community, for the vendor community, we need to figure out how better to co-create with each other and collaborate as an industry with our customers and even with our competitors. And the poster child for this most recently is OpenROADM. And the reason this is a poster child is because the optical industry is inherently proprietary. All of our competitors in the optical industry, and we did as well, very, very proud of the fact that we keep this a closed proprietary network and that's how we differentiate ourselves. That's not aligned with the value proposition ultimately of a digitally transformed, the challenges that the carrier has long term. So you either align yourself with the value to your end customer or you end up in a bad place in the future. And so we're embracing this change, and OpenROADM is one of those examples. There are 3 key interfaces defined in this, 2 of them at the optical layer, which are less interest to this community, but they're the ones which allow mixing of an optical vendor within the same network. So when an optical vendor wins a network, the carrier is then beholden to that vendor for the entire life of that network. Very importantly to this crowd, the controller, the SDN controller, the OpenROADM controller, that is multi-vendor because we've agreed on the APIs between the hardware layer and the software layer. So the multi-ROADM controller is the industry's very first controller controlling multiple vendors at the optical layer. This has been integrated into AT&T's network. They've announced it, running live traffic with Fujitsu's Vertora SDN OpenROADM controller controlling Ciena and Fujitsu's optical gear in a live demonstration in their network. And as a last example, this OpenROADM controller then has also been integrated into OwnApp by virtue of the fact that it was integrated into eComp in AT&T's environment. That has been pushed, of course, to OwnApp. OwnApp and this solution managing multiple vendors will be demonstrated in another upcoming event later this year where it will show interoperability across 3 continents and many global carriers. Okay, we've talked about the role of the virtual network services layer, the SDN, the NFV, the analytics, and the service orchestration, and how those are really key to digital transformation for the communications industry. But again, remember, the end value is at the digital services layer. This is the layer where the worlds of IT and the worlds of CT, or communications, come together. Fujitsu is rolling out the new communication stack that I mentioned, Onefinity at the physical layer, Vertora at the software layers. They're also rolling out, being a large ICT company, a new K5 cloud stack globally. And then MetaArc services, which provide multi-cloud services, which help our customers with their digital transformation and mobility, big data, IoT, and AI solutions that help them get there. These 2 solutions together are the technology required for true digital transformation of the communications industry. It's not just the technology within the communications stack itself. Last point, it's also not just a technology challenge. Digital transformation is very much a people, process, and know-how challenge. And so working with partners that can build this technology and have this broad view is also enabled us to be able to create the types of services to do consulting, design, operation, maintenance, and security end-to-end for these kinds of networks that are digitally transforming our industry. And again, the last point is it's not just the services, it's the approach to the customers and the approach to the ecosystem in our community. We need to co-create and we need to collaborate with our ecosystem partners, but also with the chosen ecosystem partners of the end customers at the end of the day. And with that, I thank you for your time.